Good morning, everyone. Today is Sunday, November the 15th, halfway through November. We're almost to December. Can you believe it? And we are here for Curiosity and Questions, Jesus and Science. And last Sunday, we had a discussion Sunday about this documentary, The Social Dilemma, and our discussion was good. And we really focused a little more on just kind of relational things and interpersonal. And so, we've talked about the things you're not supposed to discuss, religion and politics. We're not going to go super into politics, but the social dilemma does touch on the ways in which we are disagreeing in some cases about facts and just how challenging it is today to be able to have discussions in part, and some people might say in large part, because of this technology environment that we are in. So we're going to read today from 1 Thessalonians 5, which is some really good verses about supporting each other, which I think are really relevant in our current time. As I was saying before we started, we're kind of holding our breaths thinking that we'll probably be remote, soon with students. A lot of colleges are in the process of planning for that, and they have been. So I'll go ahead and share a couple church announcements, and then I'm going to pause our recording for us to do some joys and concerns, and then I'll offer up an opening prayer, and I will turn the recording back on, read our Bible verses, and then I've got a few ideas and slides that I want to share, kind of talking about some personal, family ways to respond to the pressures of screen time. But then I want to encourage us to have some discussion today, thinking a little bit about kind of the community and the society level of this, and we'll see where that goes. So here are our announcements. We've got our official announcements from the church here. The stewardship campaign is ongoing. If you've not submitted your pledge of giving for 2021, the church encourages you to do that either electronically or via the form that they sent, or I think you can probably even call the church basically any way that you want to get that information to the church. We still, well, I guess today's the day actually. So if you didn't get your Operation Christmas Child box to the church, this is the day to do it if you still have one, because those are being shipped off. And the Christmas season is going to be upon us soon. December 11th is going to be, at this point, the planned night of worship. That will be in the sanctuary, in the front yard, or online, which is something I hadn't noticed before. So we'll hope for good weather that night. But our church is continuing to offer both online as well as face-to-face opportunities to make these connections. And at the end of this month, after Thanksgiving, we're going to have the Advent devotional available. And I think that is something that I have not done every year, and it has been really good when we've done it. And so that is a great way to remain, connect with our church family, but then also just really not only celebrate, but just, I think, live into the Advent season, which is this opportunity to really prepare our hearts for Jesus and to have perhaps an even more intentional and focused time of devotion and preparation for that time. The November 1st look, as I mentioned last week, is available in our app. And if there are announcements that you know of, this is one of our main communication platforms now as a church, and certainly a great way to get a deeper look into some different ministries, including the Hope Force International this week or this month. That's an official mission partner of our church. And then we need to pray for the Thanksgiving dinner. Mike and I and Jerry heard a little update on Friday from our men's group, but there's been just a lot of discussion about exactly how they'll be able to pull this off with UCO and the community partners for the Thanksgiving dinner. And they're really, of course, wanting to do this safely, but there's a lot of concerns about how this can happen. And so we want to be in prayer for our Thanksgiving dinner. And yes, go ahead, Mike.
Diane and I visited with Mike and Liz Laska Friday night at Cook's Night Out, and it has been canceled.
Oh, okay. Wow.
What they're going to do, they're working with Hope Center and Homeland, where Hope Center would screen families, and then the families would receive a coupon or a voucher from Homeland where they could go in and purchase specific items listed on the voucher for their Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay, great.
So they're still working out the details, but that sounds like what it's going to happen
Okay.
for that this year. And don't know how much of a voucher they're going to get, whether it be $40 or whatever, but they're going to come up with something. They've had a lot of donations from people, businesses, and so forth. And I think Mike said they had already like 119 turkeys that had been donated. So those are going to be distributed to some groups this coming Friday. And
Okay.
I'm going to help them out with that to get those distributed out to some folks. So that's the latest on the community dinner.
Thank you so much for that update. Mike Laska had said they were meeting that, on Friday. So that's the update. And I think that this will be a great thing to get the word out for those that we can, because this has been, I think they said 39 years this has happened. It's just been, 4 decades. So it's something that has so much community support, and we know that there are all kinds of folks that are able to benefit from this outreach and that need this. So if we're able to let people know about it, and then also see, I'm sure that they're going to then be continuing to want donations and support to make these vouchers and everything like that happen. So we've got ways to let people know about it, and then also potentially contribute. And that may not be, it won't be showing up at UCO or doing, a volunteer, shift, but it's going to go on in a different form. So thanks for that update. All right. Well, before we do joys and concerns, I'm putting in some pictures here kind of from the week each week. And so this was from Shelley's class this week on Veterans Day. It was Veterans Day on Wednesday. My dad video conferenced in to Shelley's 3rd grade class from Manhattan, Kansas. And Dad served 21 years in the Air Force. And there at the end, her 3rd graders gave him a salute, which was very, very touching. And it allowed her to share some stories about him. I did as well with my students. My dad received his commission from President John F. Kennedy in June of 1963. And, it was a short 5 months later in November that he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. That picture, I knew that it had to be should have been taken because Dad was one of the distinguished graduates, and those were the ones that got to shake Kennedy's hand. But I got to tell the story to my kids that when I was a freshman, I went up to the 6th floor of the library at the academy. I literally found the brown, the brown cardboard box that had the June week 1963 negatives, and these were big negatives. When I asked my 5th and 6th graders this week, do you guys know what a negative is? Do you know what film is? They're like, no, we don't know about that. I was like, well, that means that the white parts are dark and the dark parts are white, and you can't really tell. So I got a small version of that printed, and I gave it to some family friends that had known my dad when he was younger. I said, is that my dad? And they're like, yeah, I think it's your dad.
Good guy.
I got what's that?
I said he was a good-looking guy.
He was. I don't know what happened in with my line, but he's a handsome guy. Still is, actually. So anyway, I got that thing printed up really big. I flew home with it. My dad had never seen it. He didn't know it existed. And so that was my Christmas present to my dad in December of '88. And I don't think I've ever, found something that was quite that cool. And that was shortly after the movie Forrest Gump had been aired, which had all these, Photoshop Tom Hanks with Lyndon Johnson and all this. And so Dad used to get people coming in, oh, your son does Photoshop? And like, no, that's not Photoshop. That's the real thing.
So, Wes, my daughter and I were going to watch a veterans parade on Wednesday. We ended up in the parade.
Okay.
She's a vet and her husband's a vet. And
that's
so
great.
We actually drove through a veterans parade over in Arkansas.
There you go. Well, Dad said they did have theirs, and then they were socially distanced in some big facility that they got together. But Veterans Day went on this year. Was different, but still so important to remember sacrifices, and there's so many different sacrifices. And today, we've got lots of folks in the line of danger with COVID and our medical personnel and all of our first responders and folks like that. I'm going to go ahead and pause recording now. We will resume the recording here, and That was our opening prayer. So let's open up the Bible. I'm going to read again from the NIV and from the Message. I'm going to read the first 11 verses of 1 Thessalonians 5, which is one of Paul's letters. And the last verse of this series in the NIV is to therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. And this was one of the Bible verses for this week, for this Pray As You Go series that I'm trying to do several times a week. And I just felt like that was a very appropriate verse for the time in which we find ourselves. And it actually connects with some of the sort of wellness and mental health ideas that I want to share here initially as we think a little bit about social dilemma and the things that we could do to respond. So let's listen together to the word of the Lord. Now, brothers and sisters, about times and dates, we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come upon them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet. For God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. He died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. As I read those verses, especially verse 6, so then let us not be like others who are asleep, let us be awake. I am reminded of how we often hear the statement as Christians, we live in the world, but we are not of the world. We are to live here in this place, in this community, and in on this planet, wherever we've been planted, but we are to remember that our citizenship is not here. Our citizenship is in heaven, and that we also should be awake to what's going on. And I think even though it's not, of course, religious, it's a secular thing, I can see in the social dilemma, this encouragement for us to be aware of things that are happening and to make choices. And I think that without a doubt, one of the choices we're called to make is to focus on the Word of God and to invite God's Holy Spirit to be with us and to invite the peace of God, the gifts of God, all of those things to inhabit us and to dwell inside of us. And so I love these verses, and I'd like to read one more version of this. And so this is from the Message, which again is an interpretation. This is it is an interpretation. It's not another translation, but it is Eugene Peterson's interpretation in more contemporary language of these same words that were written in Greek by the Apostle Paul to the Thessalonians. And here's that interpretation. I don't think, friends, that I need to deal with the question of when all of this is going to happen. You know as well as I that the day of the Master's coming can't be posted on our calendars. He won't call ahead and make an appointment any more than a burglar would. About the time everybody's walking around complacently congratulating each other, we've sure got it made. Now we can take it easy. Suddenly, everything will fall apart. It's going to come as suddenly and inescapably as birth pangs to a pregnant woman. But friends, you're not in the dark. So how could you be taken off guard by any of this? You're sons of light, daughters of day. We live under wide open skies and know where we stand. So let's not sleepwalk through life like those others. Let's keep our eyes open and be smart. People sleep at night and get drunk at night, but not us. Since we're creatures of the day, let's act like it. Walk out into the daylight sober, dressed up in faith, love, and the hope of salvation. God didn't set us up for an angry rejection, but for salvation by our Master, Jesus Christ. He died for us a death that triggered life. Whether we're awake with the living or asleep with the dead, we're alive with him. So speak encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so that you'll all be together in this. No one left out, no one left behind. I know you're already doing this. Just keep on doing it. Anything about that interpretation or those words stand out to anybody? Oh, Jerry, you're muted. I can see your lips moving. There you go.
I just said I like Peterson's interpretation of this better than the other.
I do too. It reminds me again, I think I mentioned last week about classes and students. And in fact, I don't know if hopefully, anyway, if I said this again, just forgive me because I'm over 50 now. But the art teacher at our school caught me recently and had told me that there were a couple girls who were having some words with each other. And she told them that you were going to speak with kindness. And they said, well, our computer teacher told us that too. And I said, good, I'm glad we're on that same page because our words make a difference. And we all need to be encouraging about that.
You know, one thing that I'm noticing, and I think it kind of pertains to this verse, of course, a lot of things pertain to this verse, but I've noticed how much I miss smiles, which really is an instant gratification for me when somebody smiles and I'm smiling at them. And we don't have that.
Jerry, it's interesting that you say that because we have a routine in our classroom and I greet the children each by name as they come into my classroom. So I get to greet each child in third grade every day. So anyway, but I have noticed because I miss smiles too, because smiles tell you so much. So anyway, I have the kids, we practice making eye contact because I think it's important for children, especially to practice making eye contact with adults and each other as we're talking and as we're listening. But I have noticed in doing that I am becoming more aware of eyes. And so I can tell when I'm really focusing and I'm looking at their eyes, when they're talking to me, I see this change in their eyes. So I am beginning to recognize, because I've always relied on lips all the time to smile. But when you smile, your eyes smile too. And I'm just becoming a lot more aware of eyes now than I am lips. And so I don't know, maybe that's another one of those things that we're going to learn is, not relying on just one facial feature, but being able to see, a difference. So, but I made that same exact mental image this week, Jerry, as I was looking at children as they were walking in my door, and I'm being able to judge their state of inner feeling sometimes just by looking in their eyes. So
it's a great point.
Mhm.
We were out yesterday and there were some people that had masks with smiles and fangs and other things too that are just kind of weird. One of our high school math teachers I saw this week, and they had been remote for 2 weeks, quarantining. Then we had the ice storm and everything in the middle of that. But he said how much he loved having everyone with their mask off, because he was at the point where there were over 10 kids in most of his classes that were remote. It's just really hard. And so it is good. We can smile at each other and we can be able to recognize how important that is to check in and be able to see how people are doing. And the power of words, I think that's another really strong exhortation for this. I talked to my sister on Friday, who, by the way, this is a joy I forgot to mention. Just her husband is back, Max, from 6 months of being a nurse in San Antonio, and my sister looked radiant and so happy. They had a date to a restaurant, and she was just glowing. Praise God. And so, anyway, I mentioned that maybe we should do a Zoom, because you would think that the Fryers are a little bit technological. Maybe they've been using this Zoom to connect with family. We've only done that one time with my parents where we synchronize dinner. So anyway, it doesn't have to be Zoom, but connecting with our families, finding ways to check in, and maybe finding ways to just change the tradition, but because the traditions aren't going to all be able to be the same this year. But that doesn't mean that we have to give up meeting together, right? As we read elsewhere in the scripture, we're called to continue doing that, even despite frustration and situations that we find ourselves. So we're going to chat a little bit more about the social dilemma. This will be our last Sunday. We won't do this, more than today, but we had a discussion actually with parents this last week on Tuesday night over Zoom, and we had about 30 of us gathered together, which I think might have been one of the best turnouts we've ever had. Folks were preparing dinner. I learned about, what is it called? Cookie sheet dinners or something. Anyway, you learn these different things when people get together and share. That had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but families are busy, and it gave a chance to connect and to visit. And we in that hour, I think, connected mostly and talked about some of these relational things that we can do, the ways that these affect us. And so I want to recap a little bit, give a few more suggestions that touch on some other presentations actually that we've had at school with our counselor and our psychologist. And then I'm gonna put out some questions for us to talk about, really as far as the information side of this and some of the political side of this, and think about what does this mean we need to do. We broke these, topics of the documentary into these different categories, I guess. And relationships was last week. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the psychology, and then some more family and personal action steps, and then we'll have the questions that are kind of more community and society. This was one of the big questions we talked about with parents. This is having a big impact on senses of self-worth. Feelings of identity, what should we do about that? How should we manage, notifications and the ways in which these things are trying to grab us? That statement that they make in the video about, a tool doesn't come demand your attention. It just sits there. This pencil just sits on my desk and waits for me to pick up. It doesn't ping me with a message. It doesn't try to manipulate me by, showing me something it really thinks I'm going to engage with. It's passive, but that's not the case with social media. So it's surprising to say this was 2 years ago, but we had in December of 2018 a parent university, as we call it, that was just about screen time and monitoring. And I'll send you a link to these slides, and you can get to all of the slides that are about this. But this was one of the questions that we posed, kind of opening that up, is does screen time get in the way of you living the life you want? I think that's a nice non-technological way to think about this. What kind of life do we want to lead? I mean, literally this morning, my wife is visiting with me, and I have my phone, and I'm taking a picture of breakfast or whatever. And I put it down. I mean, the reason was I wanted to give her my full attention. I don't want the precious times that we do have to be. I don't want to be asleep to how this device affects me, I guess is what I'm saying. That kind of connects to our verse today, but Thessalonians, about being asleep. And the power of these devices, of our phones and these technologies, to really become part of our psychology. There's a lot of positive here, but we need to be aware. I mean, one of the first ways to whether it's an addiction, which in many cases, screen time and social media can be, phones can be, but anytime you have something you want to deal with, you need to audit it. You need to be aware of it. You need to open your eyes to it. And so I think that question is a good one for us to pose. So one of the things that the companies, Apple and Google, with Android and iOS have done is they now have this screen time tracking, and it's a couple years old that it's been in there. And it's interesting because it kind of works against their interest. I mean, part of their interest financially, especially for Google or Facebook or these or other companies that are profiting from advertising, is to have us looking at these things more often. And so it is really good that these monitoring tools are available. And if you are not using those, that's actually a great thing to talk about even at holiday time. I know we've taken pictures over the years at holiday time with all our devices, because you can't get together with people today and not be aware of devices because somebody's going to have them out and they're going to be present. So like monitoring and kind of knowing where you're at and is that the life you want to lead? Maybe it is, but maybe you end up spending more time, looking at the screen than you want to. And so I think that's helpful. I think this is helpful too. A friend of mine, whose name is Carl Hooker, he lives in Austin, and he was the director of technology in Eanes ISD, which is there in Austin for a number of years. He came up with this kind of grid to think about screen time, because we shouldn't say all screens are evil. Let's think about Mr. Rogers. Let's think about Sesame Street. I mean, who doesn't like Schoolhouse Rock? There's all kinds of very educational messages. Okay, Jerry's going to raise his hand there. There's a lot of positive, but that's passive, and so is Netflix and just watching television. There's a passive kind of screen time. There's also a very interactive kind. They've said even babies can tell that a live FaceTime video conference is different than TV. And so that kind of connecting with grandparents or, family, that has a very different value than simply watching TV. And so I was, part of the generation raised in the 70s and 80s where, there was just all these fears that we were all going to be brain dead because of television. And now we've got, similar kinds of fears about the interactive screens. But I think there is a lot of value, but we want to also be thinking again about the kind of life that we want to lead. So a year ago, we had another parent university talking about screen time, and some of the things that we shared here, I just wanted to grab because they're relevant to really our conversation about 2084, the future, where are we going? There's a Pew Internet research study that came out just over a year ago. This was from October of 2019. And it was looking at whether, what reasons are there to be optimistic for the next 50 years of life online. And so in terms of themes, this study says that, digital life is going to be our responsibility. We're going to have to decide what to make of this. It's going to be an integral part of our lives. We need to make decisions about how we will partner with technology and hopefully be proactive about that. This was, again, a year ago, and it was saying that there's going to probably be regulation. There's going to be public policy. The unregulated internet that we've had has been kind of a wild west, probably will come to an end because leaders are going to recognize some of these unintended consequences. There have been dangerous disruptions caused. The internet of everything. This article says that in 50 years, so I guess subtract 49 years, internet use is going to be nearly as pervasive and necessary as oxygen. Gosh, I think we're almost there today, right? When virtually every student was this last spring not able to go to school, and if you were connecting, you were needing to do it through technology. I think that's really maybe accelerated our embrace of technology, but it's also shown a lot of gaps, right? There's a lot of digital divides between haves and have-nots and communities, both not only socioeconomically, but rural areas compared to urban areas. And in terms of visions of the future, we have both. We have the utopian, perspectives and visions, and then we have the dystopian or the real negative perspectives. So this article offers reasons to be hopeful for 2069. We're living longer and feeling better, according to many studies, and science is going to continue to blur lines between humans and machines. There's a scary side to that, but there's also this real positive, medicine is helping us live longer and richer lives. Potentially, we could have less work and more leisure. We also could have job disruptions, which is on the negative side. But we can have individualized experiences. So if you are the science fiction lover that my wife is, you have more access to books that you can get, to movies that you can see, television shows, old ones and new ones, individualized to your interest. Collaboration and community. Again, this is something I think COVID has pushed us in this direction, but we really need to think about how we don't just rely on let's say Facebook or these companies built on advertising to do this. How are we going to collaborate and to communicate and to build community and to transcend these different barriers that separate us? And then it says power to the people. It could further disrupt power structures and reduce inequalities. These are the hopefuls, okay? And you know that this was coming too. They call this worrisome. The worrisome visions are that we could have a widening divide between haves and have-nots economically. I think maybe Jerry mentioned in our men's group a couple weeks ago, just, how many folks are unemployed, and that those benefits, if you started drawing those in March, I mean, those have run out. I mean, we've got folks in tough economic situations. And like I said, in terms of school, COVID has really shown that because there's so many students that don't have high-speed internet or don't have a device at home. And even if they do, what is that device? The phone really is what a lot of kids have, but the phone really isn't set up for this rich, interactive online learning experience. Surveillance, that's really what that second thing is talking about, internet-enabled oppression. That's happening in China now. It's happening in other places. It even happens right now in COVID. There's a lot of kids, our daughter at UCO, Sarah included, who are being monitored when they're taking a test. And if their eyes go off their screen too many times, if they have to go to the bathroom, I mean, they can be disqualified from their test because they're being watched by, the software. And anyway, there's surveillance is not just, communist China creating a surveillance state. It's happening in other ways as well. How about just forming relationships? Are we connected yet alone? Because we see these things on the screen, but we don't really have meaningful, relationships and interactions with others. Privacy as that changes. Trust, we're losing trust and have lost trust over time in a lot of institutions. But, are people going to lose even more trust when we have, the exposure of more scandals and more problems? Their last point is there's no plan B. This is it. We don't know of another Earth we can move to. We're going to have to, take care of ourselves, not only mentally in terms of information and interaction, but hey, we're going to have to take care of the planet. This is, as far as we know, the only planet that we've got. So we got to take care of it. So that led into some really good, I think, conversations about wellness and psychology. And so I wanted to share just a little bit about this. Man, we have a lot of folks right now very challenged with COVID and COVID fatigue. We had a lot of issues in Oklahoma specifically with suicide and with mental illness. According to this 2005 study, our counselor cited, half of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by age 14. And so we need to be investing in our mental health resources for our communities. We need to encourage each other. There's still such stigma for going to talk to someone, going to get some help, and encouragement to seek professional help. Hope. Sometimes we even hesitate to go to the medical doctor for a physical ailment. That is even worse, I think, many times when it comes to mental health. This is again from our counselor, that there's no single cause for suicide. For teens, for 150 to 200 attempts for every completed suicide. So this is a huge issue, and this is a big problem today. There's finances, there's help, there's relationships. One of the most important things we know is that each one of us needs to have meaningful relationships with others. And so even though our lives look different, we're not able to go to the same places and do the same things. There are ways that we can connect and ways that we can reach out and that we can help others get plugged in when they are in need of resources. And then this one connects to the social dilemma. The number one stressor for kids, according to some studies right now, is self-image, what other people think of me. Suicide right now in Oklahoma is the second leading cause of death for kids between the age of 10 and 19. Isn't that crazy? And the number one contributor to social identity is social image. So it's comparing ourselves to each other. And these are things to talk about, and these are things to figure out, how is it that we're going to address this, and how can conversations that parents have with kids and we have with school folks, address this. Substance abuse and experimentation with substances, continues to be a big issue. Vaping is a huge issue. Drugs in multiple forms continue to be a way that people seek relief from depression, from anxiety, and COVID plays into this. I think I had a study from the UK a couple of weeks ago, that cited how high these rates are of depression, and it's just gotten much worse with the onset of the lockdown in March and all of that. So kids don't formally or completely, especially the males, right, form that prefrontal cortex. I joke that, males, it's, I think, 65 when we finally form our prefrontal cortex. It's actually 25. Girls tend to form that earlier, but, the decision making is harder. Being able to control impulses, all of those kinds of things are more challenging, before the brain is fully formed. And so here were some prescriptions that we came up with in this presentation. Again, this was a year ago. These may be things to talk about, even, in the holidays or whatever, just in the months and weeks ahead. We don't do these things as a family that much when it comes to no electronics for meals. So I'm preaching to myself here that I need to be thinking about, how does this fit into what we're doing with our mealtime? Contacts with caring adults, finding a connection to others, whether that's at school or it's outside of school. Trying to develop our positive sense of self-esteem, our coping skills, and then having access to help, mental wellness, mental health resources, substance abuse assistance, ongoing dialogue. And the link that I've got there at the bottom, the Hope Squad focuses a lot on prevention of suicide, but they've got a lot of good resources that are related to those topics. So that's actually a lot. I didn't leave us a ton of time. So let me just get to the discussion questions. And I'm going to actually pause now. I'm not going to record this part. But in terms of community and society, let's talk a little bit. Tristan Harris, one of the things he says in this documentary is if we believe different facts are true, we can't work together to solve our problems. This last point here about disinformation, that disinformation spreads 6 times faster than truth online. So what are we going to do about that? That is the question I would like to pose and